She grew up an elite athlete, AA hockey, national ball hockey, Ontario boxing champion, even Team Canada rugby. Then, in 2014, everything changed. Hit by a cab in downtown Toronto, she broke her neck and was told she'd spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. Today, she's a 2-time Paralympic silver medalist and 15-time world medalist. And she's not done yet. Thanks for coming on my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who don't know who you are, please introduce yourself.
Oh my goodness, where do I start? I guess a quick synopsis. I grew up as an elite athlete, playing many different, contact sports. So I was AA ice hockey, I was ball hockey at national level, I was Ontario boxing champion, and I played Team Canada level for able-bodied rugby as well. And then in November 2014, so just over a decade ago, I was in Toronto for work, and I was crossing the street as a pedestrian, and I got hit by a cab driver, which broke my neck, my C1, C2, and rendered me in a chair for the rest of my life. From there, I kind of, took my tenacity and resilience that I learned growing up through sport, and I kind of applied that to starting my recovery once I kind of got myself out of that deep depression that everyone goes through after something, traumatic that happens like that. And fast forward, I am now a 2-time Paralympian silver medalist for Canada in Paracanoe, and I am a 15-time world medalist in 3 different parasports: wheelchair rugby, Paracanoe, and Parakayak for Canada. And I am currently on my journey, hopefully, to LA Games, the Summer Games in 2028. And I would say my biggest accomplishment in my sporting career or accolade, I guess, is being chosen to be the Flagbearer for the closing ceremonies, a co-flag bearer for Canada, and leading all those incredible athletes. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Born and raised in Ottawa.
That's wild. How many notice that whenever people go to the Olympics as Olympians, they have their Olympian little tattoo? So where's yours?
Oh yeah, so I have one here. I don't know if you can see it. And then the Paralympic Canadian symbol is here. So when I was in Tokyo for my first games, we got to go to a temple with real samurais, and you got to make an offering there. So most people ask for victory, and in my sport, in Paracanoe, the wind is a huge factor. I paddle left. If I go out knowing there's a right man's wind, I already know I'm going to lose. The sport, there's an environmental part to it. So you kind of know that kind of going into it, and then you fight the wind down the course. But that's the reality. When you're talking about fractions of a second, then the right or left wind will do you in. So for me, I asked for my wind, and I got it. So I asked for my wind, and their wind god is called Fujin.
Wow.
So in Tokyo, he gave me the wind. And so I had to honor him when I came back by getting this tattoo. Otherwise, obviously, it'd be like bad omen kind of thing. So that's how I honored him when I came back. So before all my international competitions, I light a candle the night before, and I try to summon Fujin to come and give me my win for my competition the next day kind of thing. So yes. Yeah. And then this is my new one. I just got this one, actually. I got this one. I don't know if you can see it, but I got it in Hawaii.
Okay.
And obviously that's where the va'a or paddling comes from, natively or whatnot. So and then there's a native word on there too that's kind of means bringing yourself back to stillness and calmness and recentering yourself. And the turtle for them means patience and perseverance. So that's and then there's my actual custom made paddle on there that's kind of worked into it kind of thing. So that's my everything in my family has a lot of meaning, because my dad was an English teacher for 45 years. So I grew up with everything being super sentimental.
So the reason why I'm doing my podcast is because for me, I also had an injury, but my injury was on the rugby field. So
okay.
So this year I was going to retire, but I didn't think I would be taken off in a stretcher. And so I got hit trying to do a tackle, and it was my C456.
Oh, wow.
When I was in the hospital, it was the C6 because I couldn't feel my arms, which is freaky. So when you said C1, C2, I was like, oh my gosh, I had that feeling of not feeling anything. But then when they saw the 4 and 5, they noticed that oh, this is an injury that I've already had, which I never knew, right? So that was the part where all of a sudden I'm like, okay,
it's weird when you have a spinal cord injury, or what I think mine was like a stenosis, where they were saying, like, for me, it didn't look like anything was wrong, right?
Right.
Because I was getting better, but I always wanted to reach out and talk to individuals who had the same experience, because nobody could relate, right? Like rugby injuries are knees, ankles,
Yeah. Yeah. I tore my ACL
shoulder,
off. Yes.
right? So like when I was trying to be like, who could I speak to who also had these type of injuries, but it wasn't where they stopped, right? It was where they kind of it eventually propelled them to do more, right? Like
Right.
for you, like you were already like what would they call it? Like a multi-sport athlete, and then all of a sudden this happened, and then now you're competing in Olympics. Like whenever ever I hear all these stories, I'm like, this is
Right.
wild that
Right.
it doesn't stop you, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think too, being someone that grew up, especially in like male dominating sports, when there wasn't as many females for me when I was growing up, like there was myself and one other female in the boxing gym. Do you know what I mean? So we're seeing a lot more of the evolution now of women in sports and in all sports, which is really cool to see, like especially rugby, which has always been my favorite sport. But yeah, I think especially sports like rugby where you are knocked down 100 times and you got to keep getting back up without hesitation. You don't think about it because someone's counting on you and you got to get there, and the hesitation is the gap,
Yes.
So I think it just I mean, that's one thing that I totally preach is that the what you learn from sports is definitely something that you apply to everything else, and that is what gives you that sort of ability to have a different perspective to make those pivotal points in your life when things do hit the fan and you're trying to figure out what your next step is, right? It kind of turns you into a critical thinker, a problem solver, right? A quick problem solver. What are all the puzzle pieces? I got to solve this puzzle. Rather than maybe a lot of people who have never gone through any of that before or any adversity through sport, and had to conquer something, right? So you have your teammate next to you, you have your support systems, and you realize that it's okay to rely on them. There's all sorts of things I think that we pull from, I mean, individual and team sports I've done, but I can totally see that too, of trying to sort of find that next chapter in all of our lives, whether it's coming out of sport or it's, when we're going through a really challenging time, for me, of course, me losing my mother, for example, in the midst of when the games are coming up, and it's all these things that are thrown at you in life. And, they always talk about how you never know what someone else is going through, right? We all assume that we're going through the worst because we're in our own bubble, right? But everyone always has something that they're trying to overcome. So I think that's the cool thing about even, with you doing this podcast is connecting people together. And that's what creates that sort of community, and it can help people sort of maybe get their empowerment back for themselves to maybe try something new. You know what I mean? That they've maybe thought about, but they've never done. As scary as it can be, you know what I mean? Putting yourself out there is the only way that there's going to be new opportunities that just branch off each other, right? And that's life. You realize it's who you connect with, who you talk to, who you network with, and you can come up with some incredible things when you create teams with other people. So yeah, for sure.
So how did you get into wheelchair rugby? Because I've had seen it before, and they call it murder ball for
Yeah. Yeah. You would love it.
what sport can you go into after rugby that's in a wheelchair that's full contact?
Right. I mean, so when I was at the Auto Rehab Center, they used the Ottawa Stingers, which was the first parasport that I tried, would practice there twice a week.
Okay.
And so I had no idea. So when I had my accident, to be honest, there's lots of therapists that are around you. I had maybe a team of 10 different therapists, but none of them ever recommended parasport to me. It was the weirdest thing.
And you were an athlete to begin with, so that's so weird.
It's so odd to me because I've gone back to the rehab center with Patrice Desjardins, who's my coach for the Ottawa team, but he's also a co-captain Team Canada. He's like a triple Paralympian and medalist. But him and I did a talk just to, new patients that were there and sort of when they're going through that trauma and not knowing what their next step is. And that was a huge thing about sort of reintegrating me back into sort of a community of people I could relate to now, right? So after something like that happens to you, you have your family around you, but they just don't get it. It's like with your case, you have your teammates, but they don't get it. That they love you to death. They're there to support you, but sometimes they just don't know how. because it's not a lived experience that they've been through, right? So for me, I wasn't looking for that at the time. And I was stubborn at first to even try new parasport because I wasn't ready to accept that I had disabilities, and sitting in a wheelchair or sitting in with, some sort of piece of accessibility meant I was facing that. And so I kind of kick myself in the butt now. And that's the same story I tell everyone at the Auto Rehab Center when I went in, is that I wish I would have started right away, because there's a bunch of guys that are going around like out of bumper cars, full pin into each other, flipping over, you know what I mean? And most of them, like, at least half their bodies are not even functional, but they still have the biggest smile on their face and they don't care, and I went there as being a high point in rugby. I have, higher function than most of the other athletes. I'm a ball carrier. So watching all these guys, push their own rugby chair while they're in their wheelchair, bringing all their own equipment, doing everything by themselves, it showed me how these guys have had something either similar or even worse than me happen. And look what they're doing. Look how they fought back for their independence. Meanwhile, I'm having, my parents bring my chair in the beginning because I didn't know any different, right?
Yeah.
And what I liked about wheelchair rugby is that it followed the same culture as able-bodied rugby, where everyone was, very much a family, but there was also that like unfiltered environment where you show love by chirping each other. And I'm like, this is my jam. This is what I had before my accident. You go crazy on the rugby field, and then everyone goes and has a pitcher of beer in the clubhouse after, and everyone's friends, right? So I got that same vibe from wheelchair rugby, and I was like, this is my sport. This is my place. And the guys accepted me with open arms. And, once they realized I was like quick-witted and I was a tomboy too, and I can, deal it back kind of thing, then I fit right in. Because, in the beginning, it's like a girl with a blonde ponytail with like blue eyes bobbing around. They're like,
exactly,
just swear in front of her, you know what I mean? And then when I started making the jokes and then give them a hard time, they're like, okay, she's all right, So, but I mean, when I go back now, I wish I would have started it way earlier, but that's kind of the connection, is that I used to watch them and go, whoa, like, what is this? Like, who are these crazy guys? You know what I mean? Rampaging around in wheelchairs, like going full tilt into each other, popping wheels, flipping over. I'm like, this is a thing, letting people with disabilities do this, like at the time, right? I'm like, are they not more fragile? And then when I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, most of these guys in this gym right now should have been dead, right? They beat the odds to even be here. And now they're like, what's the difference now? You know what I mean? It's like they're fearless, right? And part of that was infectious, I feel. So yeah.
What position did you play on the rugby field before your accident?
So my gift was, I had really long legs. So my gift was sprinting and running. And I grew up with my parents, like playing national level football. So kicking, so fullback and outside center were my two. Yeah. So that was my specialty. And I was really good at communicating with my loud voice. So I was really,
I can only imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I always tell everyone that my mom started playing rugby with me when she was 42 years old. And it was hilarious because I used to do this like double clap when I go down the field and to call for the ball. And all my teammates knew like that was Bree. She was coming for the ball or whatever. And it was so funny because when I played on the same team with my mom, it was like I'd run down the field. It's supposed to be like this like intense, like, aggressive game, full contact. And I'm like, mommy. So it was so funny because my mom was in the back line too. So we go down and she was, she was inside center, I was outside, and it was so fun. But anyway, those are just incredible memories. Yeah.
Wheelchair rugby, there are kind of the forwards and the backs, right? I was reading or watching about like the chairs are built differently for those that are traditionally smashing versus those that are sprinting.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's 4 players on the court. They have to add up to 8 points based on the function class, and the classes go from 0.5 by halves all the way up to 3.5. And that's right. So the number 1 would be the ball carrier. So that would be someone like me because I'm a 3 or 3.5.
Okay.
And then after that, there's a number 2. And then usually you end up having like, a couple of defenders with those, we call them picker chairs. So it's really funny because they call it rugby, but it's on a basketball court with a volleyball, and you block like football. So if you ask me what part is rugby, I'd be like,
there's no part of rugby. There's no tackling, there's no rucking, there's no kicking.
Yeah, right? So it's the only contact sport for para. And of course it's the quads that are playing it, which is hilarious, right? The lowest function, we're like, forget it. We got this, we're doing it. So It's awesome. Yeah.
So then you realize like, okay, there's another wheelchair rugby, there's another contact sport for you. So then what helped you stay grounded when you were kind of transitioning into, okay, this is my new life in a wheelchair?
I mean, I think having that new purpose allowed me to have some like familiarity in identifying as an athlete again. And I think for me specifically, there's a lot of people that have accidents and then they, I guess, go into parasports after as their rehab, but they didn't grow up as an elite athlete, right? It was still great. It's just in a different way. So for me, I was like, okay, this is the place where I can be myself again. This is the place where none of that matters, right? I'm just taking whatever athletic ability I have and I'm showcasing my ability in those moments. And that made me feel normal. You know what I mean? It was like a little bit of normalcy in a world that's not, not normal anymore. So I think that was the biggest thing for me on a mental level. Same thing with when I played sports before. I was not someone that could sort of just keep going for runs or work out at the gym for no reason. I had to have, but if you were chasing me down the field and I had a ball, then that was what motivated me. Right. So I felt very much like, it was great having all these physio exercises, occupational therapy exercises, but it's like boring. You know what I mean? After a while, you don't have much motivation to do them because even though your goal is to get better, after so long, it's just, it numbs you, I guess. You're desensitized by it. So when you're doing these sports, just like I guess in real life, you don't realize how it's changing your mood, how it's so great for your body. So, you know what I mean? You're everything, right? So I think that was sort of the impact on me that I realized, okay, this is giving me those endorphins back in my life again. And the biggest thing I realized was how it helped me with my pain, because I'm in chronic pain with really terrible nerve pain every second of every day. And the only time that I don't feel it is when I have the distraction of playing the sports because my mind is somewhere else. Right. And then I stop my sport or I'm done whatever the session is. And then it hits me like a ton of bricks again. Right. So it's kind of my only escape.
So then how did you start to reconstruct your identity, right? Like I always feel like these are moments of like, this is what I was struggling with. Like this identity that I had is kind of gone, right? And then now I have to figure out what this new path is. How did you how to switch into that or start to construct the new identity?
I think, the mindset was a huge thing. So when I wanted to stick close to what I'd always done, because that was what I knew, that was when I wasn't creating opportunities for myself. That's when I wasn't seeing different perspectives, right? Then there weren't any doors in front of me to open, right? And it sounds cheesy, but in those moments when everything else has changed in your life or like the rug's been pulled away, those few things that you do know you want to stick close to, right? Because they give you comfort. And so until you're ready to sort of, I guess, actually be open to that, like in your heart, be open to that. Even for me with the parasports of being in wheelchair rugby and then this opportunity coming with canoe and kayak happened in the middle of COVID when all the team sports stopped and they reached out to me going, hey, do you want to try this? And I said, oh my gosh, I've never done anything like this. I think I portaged in high school, you know what I mean? And Algonquin Park one time, and like the only other time that I remember being in a kayak is like standing up on one when I was a kid against my brother and jousting with the paddle. You know what I mean? Like that was my experience I brought to the table. You know what I mean? So I think too, it's when people ask me, if I had experience in the sport or what did I transition over to that sport, I always tell them that it's more the belief in myself, that I know when I'm under a lot of pressure, how I'm going to perform. I'm going to pull it together, that I trust my adrenaline in those moments, that I trust my preparation. And as much as it's a different sport, it's still the same process, right? Still the same process. There's lots of things I took from, paddling being an individual sport. I took it from, boxing. That was all me in the ring. It was nobody else in that moment but me. All the weight was on me, right? So you try and bring yourself back to kind of some of those moments that you do know and try and apply it through that way. And that's kind of where I found my familiarity. But I think it's almost like you have to decide that you're starting like a new book. It's not even a new chapter. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I think about my life in chunks of like, I had a past life and that was like somebody different. And it was amazing for all these different reasons. But now my job is to sort of find joy and fulfillment in this new life. And how am I going to get there? And what are the things that I still love to do? I've always loved painting. I've always loved being creative. I've always loved animals. What are these kinds of things that I can still take with me, and what are the things that I really need to leave in the past because I'm just dragging that weight behind me, you know?
Right.
So
Was there another smaller action that you needed to take, right? To kind of almost like take your power back?
yeah, so I remember, going through that sort of dark depression like everybody does after something like this happens, and you spend all that time in denial, right? And that's another reason why I was saying you got to get around people that you can relate to, because that is part of your healing. It's an absolute detrimental part of your healing, because when I was just around people that were able bodies, all I did was sit there and compare myself to what I was before.
Yeah,
That was the most toxic part of it, right? It's not helping you move forward at all. So I think for me, like even when I was, I still remember being in the hospital bed for whatever many months, and I'm just lying there feeling sorry for myself, of all the things I can't do anymore. And I always say this I remember looking up sort of different motivational sayings, and I had my nurse write on the wall for me is, you don't know how strong you are until it's your only choice. So until I made that, decision with intent that I was worth it, my life was worth it, only then could I move forward. You know what I mean? And I almost call it similar to a grieving process. Do you know what I mean? Because in a lot of ways, you're literally have to bury that part of you that you can't get back, and you have to make peace with it. Because if you don't, then you're just always doubting yourself. You're always just comparing. And if you just compare to what you were before in whatever way, it could be in a physical way, it could be in a mental capacity, it could be in elsewhere, right? Then you really can't detach yourself from that. So I feel like that's kind of, for me, is just having certain motivational sayings that kind of reminded me every time I open my eyes every day. It's like, wait a second, I should be dead right now. This is my second chance. I woke up today. Many of my friends didn't. Many people didn't wake up today. So whenever people are waiting for their second chance to kind of like hit them in the face, this is your second chance. Are you breathing right now? Then you can do something. It's only too late when you keep waiting and you don't try and you don't start something new, right? And so that's my other thing too, of like, it's never too late to start something or go after your dreams. And there's all these social constructs. You should be married by this time. You should have kids by this time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, none of that matters. None of that it's just all this push in society to do what a checkbox should be. And if not, you're not on the right track. But really, there's 1,000 tracks that are sitting right there to explore that I feel like it's sitting in the dark, and they're just waiting for a light to get shined on it. And until you pick up that flashlight, you know what I mean? You're just going to be struggling around in the dark, bumping yourself into things, wondering why isn't the title there? I can't see it. You know what I mean? So yes. I feel like that's what it is. It's that you really have to go, you know what? I'm taking my life back. I only live once. Life goes by so fast, and I could have been already dead. So anything now is a blessing. Start appreciating that and look at it that way. You know what I mean?
Love that. Okay, so now the next big dream is a gold medal, which is wild when, like, I know somebody who's going for gold. You know, when you like look at people on TV and you're like, I wonder what their day in the life is of, like, like an Olympian.
Right.
Oh, she just lives in Ottawa, it's just like,
yeah, just hanging out with my cats and, Oh my gosh.
But like, what is the training like, right? For you to kind of reach, even though you're an athlete, it's a competitive sport, right? Like, you don't want to distance.
Yes. I find too that it's my sport specifically, I gain so much respect for it because of the strength and explosivity and power and endurance that you need for it. And I had never had that idea. I don't know why. I just thought like someone's like paddling through the water. Like, I don't know why. I just didn't realize when even when I went to both games, when I looked at the physique of a lot of the para athletes, right? There was only a couple sports to me where in that sense, it commanded that respect of you have to be in really top shape. Like you have to, your VO2 max, everything, you have to have your strength, you have to be like all those things. You have to be a really well-rounded athlete. And it's funny because before my accident, I remember doing this like docu-series. And at the time I had just started doing boxing, and I had done hockey, I had done rugby. And after doing a minute on a heavy bag, it was like a rude awakening of, oh my gosh, it makes every other sport I've played look so easy.
Yes.
You're not sprinting around the whole time in rugby. You may do a tackle, you may do a little spurt, but then you can stand there basically. In hockey, oh, you're tired after 35 seconds? You can get on the bench. In boxing, someone's flying punches at you. There is no tapping out. There is no, I need a little break. Can I get a little bit of water? It doesn't exist, right? So I gained so much respect for boxing when I did it. But then when I did, canoe and kayak, I really gained like a newfound respect for that sport because I had no idea the demands of it, right? Even in wheelchair rugby, same thing. You're going around with spurts, but you're not just firing across all the time nonstop, right? And so I had never experienced, it's only a 1 minute race. It's 200 meters. Yeah. And you hit the wall halfway through, and the sport literally is who dies the slowest. When you hit the wall and your entire body stops working, like it's just because you've sprinted to the max amount of time you can, you hit the wall and then everything just stops working. And it's like mind over matter, just trying to continue on the quickest you can to the finish line.
Right.
And so it's like the wall of death. You know what I mean? So it's like, you have to be really solid mentally. And you do learn that with different sports. They require different mental capacities, right? Mentally and the strength you need to sort of build up as you go. But yeah. Yeah.
Well, then can you talk about your training? Like whenever I talk to athletes and what we eat a day and then what women need to intake in terms of like the protein versus all this stuff, like how regimented are you in terms of like what you're putting into your body versus the exercise and all of that stuff?
I think it's really tough too, because on the para side, we all have these sort of permanent health issues, right? So most of us are on lots of medications, right? And so that's going to suppress our appetite. And so we have to sort of supplement different ways. Like I have to use supplements no matter what. I'll never be hungry enough to have that many grams of protein of like, 4 or 5 chicken breasts in a day. Like it's not going to happen. And with my pain, I don't want to eat as much. I have vertigo from a severed artery to my brain. I don't want to eat as much. So it is a bigger challenge in different ways to try and not only get in your training, because you have good and bad health days, right? In a perfect world, whatever the able bodies are doing, our counterparts of like the 2-3 times a day, 6 days a week. But the reality is whatever's laid out for us, we just try and show up for everything that we can, dependent on our health. Mm-hmm. And so that is the biggest challenge, and that my coaches had to learn too, is that sort of trusting that as an athlete, I'm giving it everything I can and giving him all my capacity, and all the times I can't, he knows that I really can't. Like if Brianna's complaining, it's probably already at 12. Do you know what I mean? Because if it was at a 7 or 8, I would have tried to push myself to show up. Right. So I think it's developing that trust too with my coach has been, quite a learning curve, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that there's just, you can't really stay regimented, even though you plan it out. Your health is your biggest obstacle, not your opponent's. It's different. Yeah. It's a different beast for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about that. That doesn't make sense. Cause because you're right. When you're in that much pain, you just don't want to do anything. You just want to just like lie down. You don't want to do anything. That makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, your recovery takes longer. Your immune system takes a much bigger of a hit from travel to training. I find because, I have neurological issues and I have spinal cord injury, that impacts me a lot more, and it takes me a lot longer to recover. So I can only go so long before we have to take an actual break, kind of thing, right? So it just impacts you a lot different. Whereas maybe someone without health issues would take a day to rest, and then they're back up and at 'em, right? And then, I have other things that I do for my health, like epidural needles, trigger injections, migraine needles. I'm like a pin cushion, and I do all that to try and keep my narcotics to a minimum, so I can continue to sort of be present in my life, on a mental level. But that also comes with lots of times where you're having medical appointments, and you're taken out for the week, or right, and you got to keep doing that. And that's sort of a permanent thing. So that's all kind of factors that are worked into when my coach is trying to even create, training. And then of course, adding that I do 2 sports as well, is he's trying to juggle when I'm doing kayak, when I'm doing canoe, because kayak, there's a really big balancing piece. So, it's a really big cognitive piece for me, and it's very challenging for me, because I have a brain injury, I have a TBI as well. So, there's days where I show up and my eyes are foggy, they're rolling around, and he looks at me and he's like, nope, I had kayak plan today, but it's not happening. We're going to go in the canoe. Not happening. So I can just I can power down in the canoe. I don't have to worry about balancing. I can just lean on my alma on the arm on the outside. So it's just, yeah, you're constantly changing your plans no matter what they are. I feel like the flexibility in para is what enables us to sort of navigate that. So yeah.
Wow. No, that's very, yeah. You never think about these things when for a para athlete, but it is like a reality that the injury is one thing, but there's stuff that you don't see that you guys are just struggling to just maintain. Like it's your maintenance, right?
So I don't know if you know the spoons theory. So the spoons theory is, so let's just say with a healthy able body, you may wake up with 10 spoons every day. You can predict that it's going to be 10 spoons. You'll go to bed, you'll get 10 spoons. Maybe you'll have a crummy sleep. You might wake up with like 9, you wake up with 8 one day because you realize you probably have a cold coming on or something like that. But generally speaking, you can kind of predict your capacity of each day, right? Whereas with athletes with disabilities, what happens is every day we wake up, it's like a roll of the dice. I could wake up and my pain could be so terrible, I'm not even getting out of bed that day. And I could wake up another day where I have, 5 spoons. I could have 1 spoon one day, and then we can go into negative spoons, we call it. So let's say I really overdid it today. I'm going to pay the price for it tomorrow or maybe the next 3 days. So it's always a juggle that way too, of not knowing what each day is going to bring and what my capacity is going to be. And when you're a para athlete, essentially you're getting up, you're giving all of your capacity to your sport, which is also our ongoing, rehab and recovery. Right. But then when I come home, that's it. It's game over. So that means I'm back in bed. I'm eating all my meals in bed. I'm sitting at the bottom of the shower for hours trying to deviate from my pain again. And I'm back into that cycle because sometimes the aftermath is what gets you every time a lot more, right? So that's sort of part of the juggling in the background too, of when we sort of leave from our training, is we have to try and, maybe yesterday I could make a sandwich. Today I can't even get out of bed to make myself a sandwich. So there's just different layers of it, I guess, that present different challenges to try and even just get there to show up the next day. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So then how do you deal with fear and failure?
I mean, I think once you've come so close to death and you kind of compare some things to that sometimes, it's like one of my buddies from, wheelchair rugby, who was in the military in the US and had his legs blown off and he almost died. You know what I mean? You kind of try and bring it sounds freaky a little bit, but sometimes you check yourself and you bring yourself back to those moments, like let's say I have, high anxiety because I'm on the line, I'm about to race, and the days leading up to it, you try and check yourself or ground yourself by going, hey, listen, you made it through fighting literally back from death. You know what I mean? Like, you can do this. You know what I mean? So it's not that you want to sort of unhash that again, I guess, but in those moments, I guess you're still going to have fear of failure, of letting people down, because that's just the kind of type of person I am. I was raised trying to make everybody else happy, and that's what makes me happy, and helping everyone I can around me. So, in those moments, even if I failed, I'm so hard on myself that there could be no one, even not even my coach, that could be harder on me than my, you know what I mean? Than for me, I guess, in my own mindset. But I'm always just trying to make everybody else happy too. Do you know what I mean? All the people that made all the sacrifices for me to be here, everyone back home, my coach, his family, and so I guess, there's little, again, with those motivational pieces you take along your way of like, there can never be a failure if you learn something from it, because then it's a small success. So all these kind of like little cliche things, that's literally what you kind of like apply in those moments. Like you have a roll of stickers and it's like, nope. You know what I mean? It's like denying those negative thoughts coming through, of just having those affirmations, those daily affirmations that kind of you train yourself with, that pop in those moments, and going, okay, what can I learn from this?
I also have been reading and watching that you're very much trying to be an advocate for women's sports, for girls, even for the female para athletes, right? So how has that been going in the advocacy? Like, we're starting to see now a shift in women's sports, I think recently, right? With, you think of women's rugby getting the silver medal, like there's a bigger stage now. But then we just saw that, McGill just cut like 25 of their athletics like department. So there's there's momentum for women's sports, but then there's also not the support that should be there. So what are you noticing, or what are you seeing?
I feel I see the momentum for sure, but it's kind of this, I parallel it with parasport, where we've seen some momentum start to happen, some exposure start to happen. Some of it's being televised now, but we're not there yet, Mm-hmm. So I feel like there would have never been that chance when I was a kid to play hockey to get paid any money. But at the same time, they're still not getting paid, a fair amount. There was a a post that was made not too long ago. It was a female skier. And I think when they won their race, they got like it was something like a bar of soap or something, and some cosmetic stuff. And the got $3,000. Yeah, I was like aerial skiing or something like that. And it's just, we're definitely not there yet. I feel like I'm so passionate about it because I know what sport has done for me. And again, being in male dominating sports, I've been able to show up in any environment in my life, in any context, in a room full of men, and I can hold my own. And I attribute that to the sports that I played, right? And it just brings that confidence. And I think that even if, and there's also that high rate of women dropping out, or younger girls dropping out of sports. And so we're seeing a rise in that, but there's still the financial gap there, right? To give those opportunities to youth to get there. And so I think that's a big thing for me is, even the equitable solutions, I guess, in the para games, where there's supposed to be, an equal, men and women's version. Well, with sled hockey, there's only a men's team. They call it co-head, but they don't even bring a woman. So on the wheelchair rugby side, of course, I went to the first World Cup in Paris the year after Tokyo, with the first ever Team Canada for women for wheelchair rugby. There had never been an all women's team that had competed internationally before, and we ended up getting a bronze medal. And then I went back on we didn't have the funding after that. So the same year of the Paris Games of last year, I went back to Paris in December, and I played on I guess it's like an open team where I played with women of different countries because I still wanted to show up and advocate for that movement, right? And how important it is. So I'm hoping that at the next games or the games after that sledge hockey and, wheelchair rugby will be added on the female side as well. So I think that'll be a big thing for women in sport with disabilities. But, I've definitely lived in the financial strain of trying to be an athlete, especially a woman athlete with disabilities in Canada, and how the challenges that you face with that. And I feel like, other than my health, that's the other biggest challenge of trying to drive forward. And I guess it's super frustrating because you try and get sponsors, and it's just not like the States and Canada. And, you would think that an athlete like myself, that is a proven medalist, that has a track record like I do, and that was also even chosen as a flag bearer for our country. Like, how many people have been a flag bearer for our country? And you know what I mean? And I still can't get sponsors. Like, what else do I need to do as an athlete to get somebody to buy into my journey, that we have, two and some years left to try and do this. And otherwise, I'm coming to a dead end because of that, not because of personal reasons. I'm already here trying to overcome my health just to get there. You know what I mean? There's nothing else I can sacrifice at this point. So I think we're still very far ways in women's sport to get there, but I'm doing everything I can to help the next generation.
You love it. So then what could you tell somebody today who's in that reinvention stage of their lives?
That's a good question. I mean, when I did lots of interviews for, flag bearing and what it meant to me, I think the biggest part was sort of representing the celebration of the human spirit. And I think there is something very different that resonates with people. And that's why it'll be so cool that once we finally see, the backstories of Paralympians. Because we've seen 85 Spider-Mans come out now, 45 Supermans, and there's heroes. I feel like I meet all these people, all these Paralympians, and I still go around the village going, oh my God, like I'm among all these incredible people. And I always call them white knights in their communities, because if people just tapped into those stories, imagine the movies and the documentaries that they can make about people's survival stories. Every one of these people almost should be dead. And you know what I mean? And I always talk about this. Everyone at the games has had a million reasons to give up, and they've all just chosen one reason to go on. It is unbelievable. I will go into a rugby gym with 100 guys for a tournament, and everyone around me should be dead. Every one of them. You know what I mean? And they've all defied the odds, and they're all there, and they're all trying to fight back for something in their life and some happiness. There's just so much more to life than what we think we already have. And so I think during that transition for people, it's remembering the things that you still do have, right? So I was raised, like I said, with my dad being an English teacher. So it was always stop and smell the roses. It was always find, the little joys in the small things. Don't don't overlook those, right? Because those are the things when you're old and you're in a rocking chair and you're looking back, those are the moments that will pop up, right? And so I feel like that's kind of the step that I end up taking of going, wait a second, there are lots of things that can be taken away from us.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's for me, my function, everyone has different disabilities, but I still have the same heart. I still have the same giving nature. I still have the same silly sense of humor, that I don't give a shit if someone's laughing at me or with me. You know what I mean? They're still having fun, and that makes people feel comfortable. I still have that side to me that, and my loud cackling laugh that is like, infectious to others. All these things is sort of, it's like taking what are your superpowers? And that's kind of what I feel like is that then you can rebuild and rebrand around that, because that's who you are. And that way it'll always come back to that same root, right? And that's what grounds you. So I kind of feel like no matter what you're doing, you're still going to have that same energy and passion into whatever you're putting it into, right? So, yeah.
Oh, love that. So when you hear the phrase, do her thing, what does that mean for you?
Oh my gosh, I feel I'm so much about empowering women, right? And the confidence that you get and just owning that. And just, self-love and accepting yourself and, who cares what anyone else thinks? You know what I mean? And so doing her thing, I think for me is, I always say that girls should wear their confidence higher than the heels that they wear. Right? So cut the superficial crap and just do what you love. And if you do that, then you'll have a fulfilling life. You'll empower yourself through that, because you're going to rub off on other people in wonderful ways and in ways you don't even know. You don't even see when you're doing it. And I think that's another thing, is that even if the more that you, and there's always those cliche sayings, but the more that you do love yourself and the more that you are taking charge of your own life and you have your own things that you're investing in and that your own goals, people see that around you. People want to be around you. People want to take part in that. And it maybe makes them think about what they could do, maybe change or do better in their lives. Right. So I think when I hear that, it's like, be yourself, do your thing and own it. And I love that.